Right. It's just pooling, it'll be fun. So, there we go. You can't take me anywhere. So spring elections, just a heads up, spring elections are coming up on, next Tuesday. Thanks, Molly. Thanks. Spring elections are next Tuesday. We have 4 people on the ballot. We did the ballot draw. As the names will appear on the ballot, it'll be Joe Rivera, Megan Rosowski, Maria Rudy, and John P. Dolan. Absentee ballots are available by mail right now. I'm not sure when that stops, but I think it's coming up. But otherwise, you can look at your local polling place for hours and opportunities there. The 2 candidates with the most votes will move on, or will be the board members for the next 3 years. So, or running for 2 spots. Any questions about the upcoming election?
No questions? Okay, moving on to artificial intelligence report.
All right, so we have a couple guest speakers come in and talk with you guys. Excited. We have Dr. Rich Halverson, who's coming to us from the University of Wisconsin-Madison to talk. He talked to our AI task force this morning, which is comprised of teachers, staff members, and kind of as we're working through what is artificial intelligence, how does it impact the schools, and what are we going to be doing as we work through this. And as we think about it as a school district, we think about it as kind of 2 pathways. We have the pathway that is, how do we make our jobs more efficient as employees? And then we have the pathway of, how does this impact our kids and as we deliver instruction and things along those lines. And so, I'm going to be turning it over to Rich and Amanda, but it's been an exciting day, and he's going to kind of work through some stuff with you guys, and I'm going to turn it over to them. So, you go ahead.
Green means go, huh?
Green means go.
All right. Hi, folks. Thanks for inviting me to come and talk with you today. My name, as Nick said, is Rich Halverson. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've been there for about 25 years. Before that, I was a high school teacher and a principal in Chicago. And my research interests are in how people use technologies for learning in and out of schools. So I've been very interested in sort of this boundary between how technology developments typically happen and thrive outside of schools, and then schools deal with trying to figure out how to bring into the school or how to protect kids from the technologies, but that schools make a decision about technologies and how they're used as the technologies develop. And I think I'd like to start just by having, wait, here, I can control. Yeah, good. Just to get a sense a little bit about what you care about in this space, would you just turn to a neighbor, probably just pairs up on the board, and ask each other, what's your biggest question about using AI tools in your work, in your world? So just talk with each other a little bit, and then I'll check in with you and see what you have to say. Okay, folks, let's try to wrap up for a minute. If it's okay with you, I'd just like to ask you, what are some of the things you talked about in your group? I just want to get a sense of what are your concerns and interests in AI space. Would anybody like to volunteer to go first?
Sure, we can go first. Megan and I talked a lot about, concern about how it impacts learning and not replacing learning. You need to kind of learn how to walk before you can run. You've got to learn how to read, how to critically think, how to write, and those are all skills that take time to develop and maintain. Mental health, that was something we talked about a lot, mental health for kids so that it's not isolating them. The companies that developed social media are also the ones that are in play for developing AI. It's those same, Mag 7 companies. So how are we thinking about that? And do they really have the best interest of our kids, of anybody? Even as adults, I don't think we know how to use it. Anything else? Oh, accuracy. Like in research, in the world that I work in, it's the, you've seen documentation and reports of people using AI to write their research briefs or write their journal articles, and then it isn't until somebody goes and fact checks that you find it made up resources or it made up the data that it analyzed. How do you know what you asked it is true, and how do you know how to go out and verify it?
That's thank you for sharing those. I think a lot of the concerns that you're raising have to do with the relation between AI and people and technology and people, and the fear that we have is that the AI and the technology will take the place of people. People will opt out in mental health issues where kids and people lose their identities by playing with technologies. The learning thing is absolutely critical because fortunately or unfortunately, you can get through a lot of the school as we've known it by giving the answers that the technology gives you. So now how do we pivot as educators to go back to a model of education that really is grounded in student interest and ownership? And the AI tools aren't going to go away, but we have to figure out how to give learners agency in this space and use the tools to advance their interests rather than to replace them. So yeah, excellent, thank you. Thank you. Kate and Bob, what concerns do you have?
Well,
Go ahead.
Okay. I guess my biggest concern in relation to education and being on the board of education is how we work with kids to be career ready and what careers to choose, because that's obviously going to be changing. And I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. And so it's all evolving. And you pointed out a few things too, Bob.
Just like the effect on the economy in a short term, the not knowing what's going to affect, what industries will be affected, what parts of, teaching, obviously. I'm close enough to retirement. I hope I can coast through without using too much of it, but that's the younger generations. Just another tool, so excited about it, but certainly fearful of what it can do to job market, the economy.
Yeah, this technology really is very much focused on workplace and learning and how people live their lives with information, and it's changing the world right in front of us. I think the career ready idea is the challenge for schools is to make sure that young people graduate with experience, learning how to use these tools responsibly to advance their own learning, so that they don't have to learn them from, out in the world. One of the great equity concerns that we have moving forward in our schools is that there's a whole group of kids who will just grow up being digital natives with AI tools. And then another group of kids who maybe their families aren't using them and they don't have the experience of using tools to sort of advance their learning interests. And if schools don't help that second group of kids, the divide that we have now is just going to get broader and broader. And I think especially that's going to pay off in career opportunities. Like that sort of vocational track is super important for us to think about. How do these kind of tools fit into the education for our children moving forward? Yeah, really nice. Thank you. Nick and Molly, what did you share?
You're gonna just love what I have to say. I know it. I went to a WASB session on this at the latest convention, which was very interesting, talking about like legal and ethical boundaries. It was put on by 3 professors or 3 people from the UW-Madison, and then somebody from Neola. And I just went back and kind of looked at the different things. There's a lot of considerations, and it's not that the discussion is bad, because these are good discussion to have, especially with kids, because there's a price we have to pay. There's an ethical price, and there's a ecological price. I had heard ChatGPT costs a glass of water. And we know what's happening in communities an hour away from us in Wisconsin. We do not have guardrails on for this. I know some other board members feel the same way I do. We're gonna put this AI stuff in the hands of social media companies, which have ruined so much of our connection with people. When we're suing, Facebook or Meta for all these different things, or not Meta, but it was another one, it was AI for encouraging somebody to kill themselves. I have a lot of concerns about those. And as far as economics, kids coming out of college, I think where's that guardrail to say that you're hiring someone who actually knows what they're talking about, because they've been using AI all this time? Or you have a kid who's in a degree program which is ending. So, I mean, I can speak from my own personal experience. My son has been almost graduated a year from an excellent school, great student, all the things, can't find a job. Kids who are out 2 years can't find a job because jobs are being eliminated. We're in the second industrial revolution, which is going to overturn everything that we know. We need to be very careful. And I, for one, I'm not a Luddite, but I feel like just ethically forcing it on is going to be a problem. I think parents aren't going to like it. Some will love it and some won't. And then you come into this haves and have-nots. But what I think we know about computers and some of this stuff that we've been doing is you gain efficiencies and you get an ability to have greater output, which you decrease relationships. And what we see in our world is a decrease in relationships with others has fractured our world. So, I mean, I think we have to have guardrails. I don't think that kids should not be, learning how to use it, but be very careful what we're doing. I mean, I'm glad I'm old. I'll just put it that way. I'm glad I'm old, because I can say no. I don't have to worry about this. I want less, not more.
Yeah.
So there's my speech.
No, thank you, Molly. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate hearing that. I think that the challenge with new technologies, especially revolutionary technologies like this, is that they don't have values. We have values. Usage has values. And the incredibly important roles that schools need to play in this space is appropriate use. We have to take on the role of how can these tools be used responsibly? What do they justify the commitment that we're making for the economy and for our ecology, right? Those are matters of public debate, and they need to be matters of public debate. And it's almost like the price of progress is discussion, and we have to have those discussions. And the thing that I'm excited about is that everywhere you go, there's discussions about AI. Everybody has an opinion. I think probably more people have opinions than actually use it now. And so the public discourse and the recognition of all the different factors that are involved is really a healthy sign, I think. People are taking this really seriously, both at the micro level for usage, but also at the macro level for our society.
I think too, it's like, the thing I don't like is that kids, we don't want human beings that don't understand their intrinsic value as a human being. As a person, you can come up with something that is the most incredible and unique thing, 1 out of 7 billion, that a computer will never come up with. And I think that we're ceding our authority. So those are my concerns, that, I mean, a kid is gonna come up with an art project and it's gonna be way more cool than what AI comes up with, and the fact that AI uses, trademarked, licensed, and steals from artists and writers and all kinds of things. That's what it's based on, is stealing.
I think you'll be happy to know, and some of the things that I'll talk about today, that most of the folks who are doing research in this area are exactly where you are. The idea of that there's people using tools that can also act like people. And how do you keep people at the forefront of this work? So hopefully, when I share some of these ideas, they'll resonate with you. Brian and Aaron, what are you thinking about?
Your Nick's opinion?
No, Nick has nothing.
He's just.
I shut him down. Did you want to say something?
Molly speaks for Nick.
She did
Sir, with the
today.
pleasure of the board.
She did today. He did say, in all fairness, that you can't take him anywhere,
Yeah.
just a couple minutes ago. Okay.
You know, I think what Molly said was very well articulated and reflected some of our conversation, but I would just say for me personally, you know, the whole idea of maintaining our humanity, and I think that examining how we use AI in our schools and how we expose our children to it, thinking about humanity and the 1 in 7 billion, as you referenced, is an important piece of it. And then, you know, also AI is a tool, and we're all going to need to live with it. So teaching our kids how to use that tool to complement their skill building is also important.
I was also at the WASB session that Molly was talking about. It was very enlightening, and WASB really didn't seem to be in favor of it overall. That was just my opinion and my take on it. They had some very nice blurbs in there about the need that kids just need to sit with things, and they need to be able to deeply think about things and process without having a chat box next to them to help them through it. You know, I think personally AI is way too accessible. I appreciate the need and the desire to teach it. I also think at the same time we maybe don't need to teach it. Maybe that's something that parents need to worry about at home, and schools need to have people in them. That's why we have public schools and private schools, is so we have teachers that are teaching the information that they have learned, and they've worked so hard to do that. And for kids to have a place where there's adults. The other parts that came to mind, you know, we talk about the Anxious Generation book a whole lot, and they said it over there about the anxiety and the mental health, and kids already do not feel like they need to do the work. Bottom line, they just don't. That's not going to improve. We also just implemented a cell phone policy in our district for the high school and middle school this last year. And so I'm curious, when we don't have phones in the classroom, like how does continuing to introduce AI technology when we're trying to remove certain things like that align with the purpose of having that policy? And you know, just a fun fact that I read recently, that Gen Z is doing a digital detox. So they are unplugging as a trend due to the anxiety and mental health. And really, my question becomes, how do we support that? How do we support that these kids are literally seeking out in-person communication and conversations because they don't want that to be replaced? And they're realizing that the last couple of years, these kids have really missed that because of things like this. So I thought that was interesting, and I'll leave it on this. There happen to be 50 alpha schools in the United States. I just read and listened to a great article, news broadcast on this, and they are AI schools specifically, where they use learning for 2 hours a day, which is almost identical to what homeschoolers do. And they do replace teachers in a lot of that, but then they use the teachers later on to build life skills, and they spend the rest of their day doing life skills and interacting with people and stuff. And I think that's a neat idea, and they're calling it like a smart screen time thing, but their motto is chat boxes are cheat boxes. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing that. I think one of the great sort of features of American public education is interested families and interested people set the policies and set the guidelines for how schools work. And I feel like Walt Whitman was a poet in the 1800s, had this famous line, "America contains multitudes." And one of the things we know in the United States is that people will find the kinds of opportunities for their own learning and for their children's education that align most closely with their values. I don't doubt that there will be, in the very near future, schools that are largely run by AI working with teachers. But then I also don't have any doubt that there will be schools that are completely technology-free. And the way that sort of the market forces behind public school are moving, those options will be available to many people. And so this kind of litmus test technology, my sense of it is that as a professor in this space, do you all know the Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham? Oh, yeah. So the AI to me is almost always a green eggs and ham phenomenon. Like, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like the environmental costs. I do not like the screen time. I do not like it. But then when you try it and you see that it helps you advance the things that you care about, then you sort of get a sense of a bigger picture of how AI fits in with lives, that it does have adverse consequences. It always will, because it's a very disruptive technology. But the question for us as educators is, we can't go backwards. We have to figure out how to make the tools serve the values that we have. And that's an important task for public educators. And just by inviting me to your conversation, I'm really happy to be able to talk with you about some of these ideas today. I want to share some research with you, share some examples with you about how AI is changing teaching and learning in front of us. And then, you know, you will decide on your course about what stance to take on these tools and how much you're going to integrate them into your own work and your own life. I want to start off with, oh yeah, here's my sort of like, I think these things are just true, just from my experience, just watching how things are proceeding in the world. Generative AI, I think I got to cross out will. It is transforming how we think about teaching, learning, and schooling. If I would stand up and, is there a pointer on this? No, like you can't see it anyway because I'm pointing it back of you. It's really teaching learning, because most of the experimentation with AI as an information tool is happening outside of schools. There are a lot of teachers who are using AI, some of it on their own time, some of it in schools, but teaching and learning are being transformed, and schooling will soon follow. And like I said, because this is such a new tool, a new technology, it's not clear where it's going. But it is clear that change is happening. It's the most revolutionary knowledge tool ever built. I'll just let that sit. All the knowledge tools that we've thought of so far, textbooks, chalkboards, writing, this one talks back. All the other technologies that we've ever had have been relatively static, depending on us as agents. This one, if you say, how can I improve my argument? It will talk back to you. It's the first technology that we've had that's responsive and reflective. And that's a huge threat to how we think about education and how we think about learning, because schools and teachers and mentors have had that role of the reflective partner, the one who talks back. Now we have a non-human thing that talks back to us. It will democratize access to learning everywhere for everyone. This is the one that I think is the most disruptive, because you can ask any AI tool, Chat or Gemini or Grok, to outline a course of study for you, and then chunk it up into pieces, and then give you feedback every step along the way, whether you want to learn to code in Python, or you want to make better old fashions, or you want to order food for your summer holiday party. It will chunk up the tasks for you and give you benchmarks for how you're doing, and we'll also talk back to you about where to get the best brats. Right? It just embeds learning in our use of digital tools everywhere. And I think schools have always been the places where we go to learn. That's schooling and learning kind of go together that way. But this kind of tool increasingly is going to drive a wedge in the control of schools over learning. And then that puts us on the question of how are schools gonna react to this? And how are schools going to either double down on their historical role, or are they gonna try to embrace new ways of looking at these tools? This is a little bit about me. I wrote a book a couple years ago called Rethinking Education in the Age of Technology. I wrote it right before COVID, so it has nothing in it about generative AI. I think there's like one paragraph because this whole thing sort of dropped like a bomb on us. But we talk, I think, Molly, were you talking about the second industrial revolution? We talk about that. That's the basic metaphor in this book.
From me?
With what?
You stole it from me?
No,
Kidding.
I got this in 2012, so, okay.
I stole it from you. I'm sorry.
But we talk a lot about how information and industrial technologies kind of work together. And so that's a dominant theme in this book. And the other one is that I worked for a long time as a school leadership researcher. And so I talk a lot about how leaders develop schools that improve learning. And so I'm going to try to bring both of these perspectives together today in talking with you about some of the research and what we know about AI and learning. We'll just go through these kind of fast. Big changes in learning technologies. I realized when I put a timeline up like this up, I've been around for a while. Because I was a professor when all these things came out, but in 2000, I don't know if any of you remember interactive whiteboards, learning management systems came out then. All of these technologies were supposed to be revolutionary. And some of them were better than others, right? So then you had one-to-one laptops, games and learning, video games and learning stuff, cognitive tutors, which are sort of maybe the uncles of AI systems, iPads, flipped classrooms, maker spaces. Then there was a sort of a rush in the mid-2010s, personalized learning, STEM and STEAM education, coding, learning analytics, and then we had the COVID crisis. And that was really the first time that I think educators realized how powerful learning technologies could be. Because I don't know if you remember this, but right before COVID, there were all kinds of discussions about whether Google Classroom was robust enough and secure enough to carry teaching and learning. And then all of a sudden it had to. And if we didn't have distributed learning technologies, our schools would have been nowhere because you had to have some way of reaching out to families and parents who were not in school but had to go to school. So I think this showed to educators around the world that the kinds of learning technologies that Google came up with could support teaching and learning, not as well as in person, but they could keep it running. But I think this is a red line, and I think people will remember this red line. December 2022, it was the release of ChatGPT 3. It was the first commercially available generative AI tool. I just want to keep that date in mind, 2022. People started working with this stuff and talking about it in 2023. It's only 2026. This is a baby technology that grew way, way, way faster than any other technology before it. There's all these graphics that show like the relative growth of Facebook or YouTube, and all of the open AI, the generative AI tools just have taken over the world. So I think this line is going to be either, if you don't like this movement, a disaster moment, or if you do see the power of AI, an opportunity moment. Do you all know who Sal Khan is? Khan Academy was probably the leading education resource on YouTube for years. Sal Khan was an engineer who wanted to give math tutoring to his nephews who lived in India. And he looked online for resources, couldn't find any, so he made a series of videos that he put on YouTube that broke down algebra and geometry so that young people could understand them. This gave rise to a whole empire of learning resources on YouTube. And when Sal Khan had an interview right before ChatGPT came out, where he was really interested in this kind of old education finding. This talks about the effectiveness of student groupings in schools. So the first one that says conventional that's the typical classroom. It's a 1:30 ratio, right, where there's one teacher, 30 students. You get what we all see as a bell curve, right? Just as many kids fail as succeed. If you push the pedagogical strategy over a little bit, you get mastery learning, which is the idea that kids keep at it until they get it, right? And you give them the time that they need to get it. But the most effective is tutorial, one-to-one learning. And this is sort of universally recognized as about 90% of the tutored students attain the level of achievement reached only by the highest 20% of the conventional outcomes. But it's always been too expensive. It's just especially for public schooling, it's too expensive to do one-to-one tutoring. This is a luxury that some people can afford. What Sal Khan saw and what many other people saw is that AI systems are not exactly the same as one-to-one tutoring, but they're pretty close. They have infinite patience. They can answer any questions that you have. They're experts in all the different subject areas. They can speak in any language. They can do symbolic manipulation. They can create images. They're more versatile than more tutors. They're not people, though. So for many people, sort of this push towards the one-to-one model is a really effective way to think about how do you create schools that are more effective. I like this guy. His name is Ethan Malik. He has a Substack called One Useful Thing. He's a pretty interesting guy to follow for advances in AI. He did a study right after, came out in 2024, right after the first generative AI systems. And let me break this down for you a little bit. They did a study with 750 consultants at, it was one of the big consulting firms. It might have been Deloitte. And they broke the consultants into two groups. Half used AI with no PD, and then half used AI and got a little training on it. And after a certain amount of time, I think it was 6 months, is that right? I think it's 6 months. This is the distribution of effectiveness that you saw between the two groups. The AI-powered group competed 12% more tasks. They were quicker, and they had higher quality results. The most interesting thing about this finding, though, is that through all levels, participants showed improved performance. The increased performance was greater for the bottom 50% than for the high achievers. This is really interesting if you're interested in raising the achievement for the kids who struggle the most. Because high achievers, this is sort of a thing, like high achievers tend to be good at the systems that they're navigating, right? They know how to get the resources, they know how to ask questions, and if AI is an option, they'll use that too. But the kids who struggle the most, the ones who don't feel like they're part of the system, they're the ones who need the most help. And this study and studies like this are finding that the greatest effects are felt by the people who were the lowest achievers going in. Ethan Malik also has this finding. He says AI is weird. And this weirdness doesn't ever go away. I think, Megan, you said before about, or maybe it was Maria, about the thing making mistakes, hallucinating. I don't think AI is ever going to get to be like a calculator. I think it's always going to be weird. Just the way people are weird. You know, sometimes you have a person that you think you can really trust, and then you ask them a question one day and they just come out of left field. Because and inside of the brain of an AI system and inside the brain of people, there's this sort of, we don't really understand how neurons work. We understand the chemicals of neurons, but we don't understand how ideas are present in our brains. And we also don't understand how ideas are carried in AI systems. So these systems are never going to be fully reliable, which means that they're always going to require people to correct them, to make judgments about their output, to make sure that what we get is the answers that we need. What Malik says is that on some tasks, AI is super powerful, and others it fails completely. And unless you use it a lot, you won't know which is which is kind of the same thing for people, right? Everybody's a little bit strange, but if you get to know somebody better, then you find out about their strangeness, and they become a little bit more predictable. That's kind of how AI tools are going to be used by people in the world as well, not as calculators.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
So you said the bottom 50% of achievers are the group that goes up when they're using AI. And I guess I do wonder a little bit, is it going up because they're getting the answers? Or is it going up because they're actually gaining information and learning?
This study was interesting because it had a multi-dimensional measure of success. They completed the tasks. They had higher quality results, and the results were judged by the people who were the clients. And it was a team activity, and so they had to like make their reports as a team and show. Like, this has a lot of human element in it, so it's not like I give you a test and you give me an answer. You know, it's why I really like this study, because it showed like how the AI tools work together with people rather than independent of people.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah.
But I do think, like, in our schools, there's a whole group of kids who are disenfranchised. And they feel, and like, we know this from learning psychology, that the greatest factor that prevents young people from engaging in school is fear of embarrassment. It's self-esteem. If you don't know the language well, if you've been labeled as a special ed kid, if you've had behavioral questions, if you've had run-ins with the system, these factors prevent an open engagement with schooling often. And the kind of tools that we see with AI that allow for sort of infinite experimentation with no shame can help bolster the confidence of young people, so they'll get a better chance, they'll give the system a better chance.
That's what I was wanted to comment on, is the engagement part, the failure to launch kids, that like consider themselves, to be not smart or whatever. The basic parameters they can throw in gets them started. Yeah. And that's where I'm very excited to hear that the lower half has actually helped, because those are the learners we're trying to hit, so very interesting. Maria?
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
please.
So I kind of riffing on a little bit of what Kate was poking at on this study, I guess where I struggle, and bear with me for a second. So we're drawing a conclusion from a study of consultants, and these consultants are from top firms. I've heard this study talked about before on a couple of other podcasts, and they talk about it more in reference to how can we help work more efficiently. And the conclusions that they were drawing from this study centered more on it's allowing consultants to work faster and produce more high quality work. And you're gonna have kind of some erosion in that that working group in terms of numbers of people needed, because AI is gonna make them, instead of taking 3 months to build your slide deck for your client about their new business model, you're gonna do it in 48 hours, right? The other piece of this where, for me, it's just that tug and pull. I hear the thread that we're trying to pull out this is how can we leverage a tool to help some of our learners that are struggling the most, which I absolutely love and think we need to continue to have those conversations. In this instance, the people that we're studying are like consultants for Deloitte or Boston Consulting Group. Like, these are not low performing students. It takes a lot to get into that area. This is not an apples to apples comparison, I think, is where I'm going with that. And as we think about this conversation, the other guardrail or concern that comes to mind is the technology is evolving. Like, you pointed in your timeline to December 2022. We're already on Sonnet 5.6 for Claude and ChatGPT 5, which they actually may have just pulled back. The versions that they're putting out, my point is, are evolving faster than anybody can study them, faster than anybody can wrap their heads around how to put guardrails on, not only just in an educational space, but in a workspace, in a data security space, in a national security space. there's a lot of pieces and prongs to this. I do love and appreciate this study. I think what I would offer is I think this piece speaks a little bit more to efficiencies for me than it does to helping to bridge educational attainment. And I would love to see more studies around how do we use this to bridge that gap, because I think there's a lot of potential there.
I think that your calling for more study and evidence has been heard by, as an education researcher, almost everybody who's funding education research. There's an AI angle to it now. In science education, in literacy education, in teacher preparation, everybody wants to know the questions that you're suggesting. And because, you know, the timeline of research is usually like 3 to 5 years before you get a good study out. And so we're sort of like grasping at different indicators to say, is this something that's interesting? While changing along with the world. So your call for more attention to this is being heard and acted on by people all over the world to, can we fill in some of these gaps, right? And so we don't have to use these non-apple to apple comparisons, as you mentioned, yeah. Yep.
If I could make a comment too, when I did the WASB breakout session along with Aaron, one of the things they did bring up, they had part of one of the 4 speakers, so 25% of the time, was a woman who talked about how AI does poorly amongst children who are non-English speakers. And it reinforces whatever you want to call it, whoever has created the AI, their beliefs are coming through in the AI. Do you know what I'm saying? So it reinforces things that maybe a kid who is in special ed, doesn't mean anything to them, or a kid who comes in and they're an English language learner, it's going to be more difficult for them. I mean, and it's not to discount that it's interesting, and the thing, like, too, when I think about, like, if you had a study, I can see where you have tons of data, and it's going to take you a long time to aggregate it. You use AI to aggregate it. It tells you what are the dominant themes, right? Even then, that's useful. But sometimes the answer is not the dominant theme. So that's a whole other thing in a workplace. Or even like I've been going through my house, throwing away papers from college that I kept because I needed them, apparently. And
I still have all mine too.
I know, and it's really hard because I look and I think, oh, look what I did, dot matrix printer, you know, typed out.
Spindle on the
Yes,
side.
I mean, all of the olden days when I started, so we've come a long ways. And I look and I think, dang, I was really smart. And my teacher, you know, I love that. And I looked up at the comments, unique perspective. I like that commentary. We're not going to get that. We need people to be like, I want the bizarre and the weird because that might be the answer. And I have real concerns. Well, obviously, you know that.
No, I hear you.
Not that I don't appreciate what you're saying, but it's like, okay, take this feedback back
Yep.
when you are, you know, thinking about things, and, you know, go through that process of how does it impact the weird factor. Weird is important.
Thank you, Molly, for sharing that. I want to make one comment about the beginning of your comments. I had not heard those data about students who are language learners. What I had heard was that the AI detectors over-identify language learners, because language learners if you're a language learner, it really helps to have a translation tool because it gets you in the game. You don't have to be quiet. You can have a voice. And the algorithms that were trained for the AI detectors were similar to the ones that were in plagiarism detectors. And because language learners use tools like Microsoft Word and Google to translate their work, the AI detection systems flagged language learners at a higher level, which created a little bit of a stigma for language learners to use AI tools. But on the other side, the fact that you have a system that can speak to you in whatever language you come to it and can scaffold you towards the language that you need to learn on the fly when, how many languages are spoken in your district? Yeah, more than 10, right? And you don't have speakers of all those languages. And having a tool that can talk to kids at their home language and scaffold them towards where they need to be instantly, it's worth looking at. It's worth looking at. I am going to talk a little bit more about the research and then get into some recommendations because I'm respecting your time. This is a study that came out last year. It got a lot of press. Maria, you probably heard this because this was a big podcast study as well. Your Brain on ChatGPT. They had this idea of cognitive debt, which is like how much do you offload your learning to the system, which I think is kind of a cool idea that we're going to hear more about. The study finds that participants who begin their writing process without AI retained more. So if you started off with notes, you started off with an outline, you started off just talking through something, if the idea started in your mind, and then you used AI to develop the ideas, you kept more of the learning. In the other group, they asked students to just start writing with the language model. And they said those students were less likely to produce, they were more likely to produce superficial and repetitive writing, and they didn't know what they were writing about. And so it's turning out that AI detectors don't work very well, but the best way to do AI detection is to ask the kid. If a kid writes a story, like a history paper on the Revolutionary War, and you say, so, about those Hessians, tell me a little bit about the wars in New Jersey. And they go like, what's a Hessian? Then like, okay, good. Maybe more of you on the next paper and less of the tool, right? This thing about agency, about who owns the thinking, is the problem moving forward. I was telling Nick and Amanda earlier today that I went to a conference. I talk a lot to superintendents and to school boards and schools around the state. And one superintendent at the last conference stood up and said, so let me get this straight. AI is going to make the assignments, AI is going to take the assignments, and AI is going to grade the assignments. So why are we not giving the diplomas to AI? And I think that you hit it. That is the challenge, because that can be done. But as educators, we cannot allow that to be done. That can't be the way we go. We have to preserve agency, and we have to preserve ownership of thinking. The study suggests that education models might delay full AI integration until students have engaged in sufficient self-driven cognitive effort. First student, then if you introduced AI, next. But don't start the brainstorming with AI, because then the learning doesn't stick. The paper supports collaborating with AI, and this is sort of the theme that I'm going to talk about the whole time, is that AI only works best when it's in a person-system collaboration. Judgment has to be retained by the people who are doing the learning and doing the teaching. This is a person who I found recently. It's a website called artificialityinstitute.org, Helen Edwards. And she's talking, several of you mentioned about the mental health, cognitive costs of being immersed in digital worlds. And she and her colleagues think about this phenomena, they call it drift. And as soon as you hear it, I think you could probably see it and feel it, right? You get involved in an AI system, it's sort of like Netflix watching. Like if you get in a series and you just go on and on and on, and you just sort of like sink into your couch, and it becomes a lot less you and a lot more Netflix. And that's happening all over the place. Like people, their sort of attention and their self drifts into the media that they're consuming. And in their research, they find two kinds of sort of agents in their work. One is they call them co-authors. They say people integrate AI across their cognitive processes, but they're choosing how and when to integrate AI. I do my thinking, I ask for help when I need it, and I use that help to advance my thinking. Versus outsourcers, people who use it but keep it outside of their creative process. In other words, they let the AI tools carry the boat for them. This is a huge problem in doing homework, right? Where you can see kids who are co-authors, and you can also see kids who are outsourcers, who just let the tools carry the learning. This is where, when the authors of Stay Human say, this is where we need to be as educators, to push folks towards co-authoring, to help people understand that the tools advance their interests, but they don't replace them. And it's not inevitable that we become outsourcers, because there are co-authors, right? So even though the press, the historical press is for people to become overwhelmed by the media, there are many people who retain their authorship in using tools like this.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Um,
go ahead.
so I've seen press in recent days, talking about how, kind of goes back to your timeline, but you don't have to go back to that page, but that bringing the one-to-one laptops into school, they're worried, there's research showing that that has maybe had a negative impact on learning, right? So, you know, the research that talks about how, like, writing things by hand, you know, you have this physical process, it's integrated into your mind. And, you know, our kids use laptops K through 5, but not as often. And then they get their own laptops in middle school and high school. And of course, we're not having people write papers by hand anymore, you know, who wants to do that? But how does that factor? I just don't know if you have any viewpoints on that, like the computer always in the classroom, not having the physical book in your hands. I just worry that sometimes that there are old school ways that should still be around even as we use these new tools. Not to say we have to get rid of all of our online stuff, but like if I'm gonna read a long paper I need to edit, I still print it out because I absorb the information better. And if I write things down, I memorize the phone number I write down. I don't memorize a phone number I type into my phone. So just that physical component of learning.
I have two thoughts to share with you, Megan. Thank you for those questions. The first one is that as a person who's been in this field for a really long time, there are really no conclusive studies about the effects of technology on learning one way or the other. It really depends on how you're using it. Two scenarios, right? One, I'm just going to throw kids in a room with some automated curriculum on tablets and say, go ahead, learn. Well, that's a disaster. That's never going to work. The other hand is I got a teacher who really understands how interaction with digital media and production works, and that might be an AP history teacher who's asking kids to recreate historical events using AP or using AI tools. Like, that's going to be a smashing success. Yeah. Those are both using technology. And from the category perspective, they're the same thing. But of course, they're very different because the key variable is quality of instruction, which is a very old-fashioned, a very old-fashioned idea, right? Now, Nick mentioned today that his kid is in Iowa State. Yep. And now, in order to get beyond AI testing things, they have analog, like you have to write out the test. I mean, handwriting is cool because handwriting teaches your body to embody your knowledge. It's not just up here, it flows through your arm, through your fingers. It's good to learn to write. And if you have to write to communicate, that means your writing has to be clear. If it turns out that AI tools spark a rebirth of some of the old analog tools and the oldest pedagogies we have, high quality instruction, building relationships with young people, handwriting, that's a win for everybody. This is a really big space, and it doesn't have to be either or. We can have AI advances and also go back to understanding calligraphy. Those can both happen at the same time. One doesn't have to come at the expense of the other. But for me, the most important thing in this space in school is high quality instruction. If you have teachers who know how to manage the tools and introduce students how to be agents in their own learning, this is what makes for a 21st century learner, right? The tools alone don't do it, And the teachers without the tools don't do it. You gotta have them together. Amanda, we were gonna do the notebook LM thing, but I think we should go past that just in the interest of time, okay? And I'm just gonna go to the last part of my comments. Is that all right? All right, biggest hurdle that we have is to use the tools. Like I said before, AI is weird. If you're not familiar with it, then you follow the New York Times and podcasts, and it tells you what AI could be. You should, the tools are easy enough to use that you all should try. Just plan a dinner. Plan your next trip to Hawaii. You know, use it for the kind of things that you would ordinarily use it for and make your own verdict. There's no training needed. They've taken coding completely out of computer literacy by using the most advanced code we have, which is language, our spoken language, and not just the English language, but any language. You can switch to Russian or Arabic. Any language, you can just immediately start to interact with the system. And so wherever you are, these kinds of tools make it really easy to get where you want to go. It's infinitely patient. Sometimes when you use an AI tool, you'll find it goes down a blind alley, and you think, no, I don't want that hotel in Hawaii. Why do you keep on recommending that? All you have to do, literally, is hit reload, and the thing starts fresh. You can't do that with people because they're your friends. Right? And they don't like that when you say, I'm not listening to you anymore. You're not making any sense. But they don't have feelings, AI systems. So on we go. Everywhere, everyone will always have access to the best versions. There's many bad side effects about the social media companies controlling the AI space. But one of the good side effects is they are desperately competing against each other for having the best product. And so they put the best product in front of the most people as quickly as they can. So the latest versions of Claude, the latest Gemini, the latest Grok versions, the latest Copilot, you get them right when they come out. And so all the tools that you get to use are the very best cutting edge tools. And this is the thing that just always blows my mind. The version you use today will be the most primitive version of AI that there is. These things will just keep on getting better and keep on getting more interesting. This is a study that just came out this year by the RAND Corporation. AI use in schools is quickly increasing, but guidance lags behind. That's why I really enjoy talking with you today. Over half the teachers and students at schools in a nationwide survey said that they used AI for schools, and you know that's not the number. Right, you know that's not the, I ask my friends at UW, like, are you using AI in the research? No. Well, right, because everybody's using the tools, it's just, are you owning up to them? Are you making it obvious? But when they went to this one, they said 35% of district leaders reported they provide students with training on AI, and 80% of students reported that teachers did not explicitly teach them how to use AI for their schoolwork. It's that 80% I'm really interested in, because half of those kids are going to learn how to use it at home, and half of those kids are not going to learn how to use it at all. And so the discrepancies that young people bring to the schools get reproduced by the schools, if the schools don't take on the training task as a public responsibility. I don't think I'm going to talk very much about this one, but I think I'll talk about this one. This is a graphic that OpenAI helped me build, the AI-ready schools spectrum. And I have to admit, I see this spectrum a lot in talking with educators around the state. Analog schools, I don't want to have anything to do with AI. The ways that we have been teaching are effective, and no thank you. I don't want that at all. Efficiency schools, which I think you brought up, Maria, before, is how can we use AI to make our work more efficient, do the grading better. We keep the same assignments, we keep the same structure, but we use AI to make it, to optimize. The integrated AI school, I think, is interesting. It uses AI to optimize outcomes, and it integrates AI use into student work, but largely keeps the structure of the school the same. And then the AI native school is when you let students co-design their learning with teachers with AI. So now, like, think of I used to be a history teacher, so all my examples are from history. In most history classes, there's a linear progress of lessons through American history, through world history. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Because there's only one teacher and many students, right? And so you have to keep it linear. But if you can branch out and you can allow students to pick their own path and follow the kind of story or characters that are of interest to them in every different episode, you can have a much richer and robust and more diverse set of perspectives in the classroom, but a single teacher can't do that. That's always been the problem with personalized learning. It's too much of a burden on the teacher. But if AI tools can expand the range of choices that students have and allow students to have some design in their work, that can create for a much richer kind of learning space. So what do you do next? First one, from my perspective, openly encourage teachers and students to share their AI experimentation. That requires trust, because if students especially have to use AI and keep it on the down low because they're afraid of getting caught, they're never going to be open about it. You have to have an environment where the teachers use it as much as the students, and they're willing to talk with each other about what they're learning and what they still need to learn. This one, I know this horse has left the barn. I know you all worked on this. I mean, honest to God, it's a supercomputer. It's the most effective and powerful technology anybody's ever built. And our attitude as educators is, instead of looking at this thing as a gift horse, we ban it. And we tell kids you can't use it. And I know why, because the social media thing just got so far out of control that kids can't pay attention in schools because they got this in their pocket. But we let that happen as educators. When Nick and I were talking about this before, in the early 2010s, when social media tools just came out, I gave these same talks to people in schools, and they're like, we're not doing Facebook, we're not doing Instagram, we're not doing Snapchat, we're not doing any of that stuff. That's subversive, and that's the kids' business. And so as a result, those businesses took off with a youth market that was completely outside of the control and interest of schools. And so now we're in this really sad place. Supercomputers, kids bring them every day. They're not allowed to use them. There's no evidence that bans on phones improve student learning. There's just no evidence. There's a lot of evidence that it makes life uncomfortable for teachers. There's a lot of evidence for that. There's a lot of evidence that it disrupts schools, but for outcomes, why repeat the failure to address the rise of social media? We did this as educators. We did not keep our eye on the ball when the last revolution in this world happened. Let's not try to do that again with AI. Don't invest in detector systems. They don't work. The best detector system is to ask a kid if they can repeat what they gave you as the work. Show me your work in person. Give me an analog version of what you gave me digitally. That's the best detector systems. Develop clear policies for how students can use AI in their work, and then try to integrate AI tools in as many teaching and learning activities as you can. Make it literacy. Turn AI systems into microwaves, in the sense that you don't know how a microwave works. I mean, I don't know how a microwave works. I shouldn't speak for you. But when I want popcorn, I hit the popcorn button, and then I get popcorn, because the AI, the technology behind the microwave is invisible to me, right? AI systems are going to be like that very, very shortly. And if we as educators understand how these things work and where they're going to go, by the time they become ubiquitous, we're going to have really robust, appropriate use models. But if we kick the can down the road again, I'm afraid the same thing's going to happen with AI as happened with social media. It'll just be out of our control as educators, and we won't have anything to do about it. Is generative AI as good as a teacher? No, it's not. It does have some advantages, but no, it's not as good as a tutor. It won't ever replace teachers, because AI systems don't teach judgment or character. They don't value idiosyncrasy. They're designed for a common norm. They flatten. They don't highlight. It's always going to depend on good educators making decisions with kids and teaching people how to build judgment and character. But they are changing how we think about teaching and learning. And here's the thing I want to leave you with. What'll happen to schools that don't embrace AI? They'll be left behind by resourceful students and families. You are already seeing that, I'm sure, in your community. There's young people and families who are just running with this ball. And the thing that makes me so concerned is this equity gap between students plus AI versus students alone. I have a kid who's a sophomore in college. She went to a school and I study this stuff for a living. She knows how to use AI really well. She uses it as a writing partner. She uses it as a study guide. She interacts with her friends using AI. If she competes with kids who don't know how to use AI at all, it's not a competition. She's so far, she could do so many more things than kids who come without a knowledge of the tools. And that's just going to be amplified as we move forward in this economy. The problem, and I'll say this again, and I know I've said this a couple times, the challenge here is that when kids pick up learning how to use these tools at home, and they got to compete against kids who don't have this exposure at home, it's a lopsided competition. Schools have to be the corrective, just like they're the corrective in everything that we do for raising young people. Some kids learn math at home, some kids learn science at home, but most kids learn it in school. And learning how to use AI is just as important as learning math and learning science and learning to read. And it's going to get more important as we move forward. If schools stand to the side, this gap is only going to grow. So I guess as a researcher, I really appreciate your responsibility in governing this school district and setting the course for the district. I tried, as much as I could today with the time that I had to just give you some of the research and some of the enthusiasm around this work, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you for opening up your meeting to me today.
Mr. President? Thank you so much for coming. This is super interesting. I am a bit of a Luddite. Molly said she's not. I am a little bit. But it's very clear from the way you did this presentation that I'm sure you were a fantastic history professor or teacher, and you're a great professor. Just the way you were open to our questions and our fears. And I think kind of going to what you were talking about and what Molly said, one of my worries is, AI is going to get to do the fun stuff, like make the art and the music. We've seen some of that. And then like the humans still have to do the drudgery, where in my mind, it's like the computers are supposed to do the drudgery and the humans are supposed to get to do the fun stuff. Like, I don't want to see it flip, right? But the AI makes me very nervous. I have little kids, but I also realize I need to take my head out of the sand and understand it and not be afraid of it. So this helps me learn more about it and not feel so scared. Still a little scared because I watched Terminator a lot as a kid. I say this all the time. Everyone laughs, but
Yeah.
Skynet was very scary. And so there's always that little bit of that there. But I really appreciate everything you're sharing and all the work and research you've been doing throughout your career. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I want to share a story about young kids using these tools. My wife is a professor at UW also, and she does arts-based education. She has this really cool program called Whoopin' Soccer, which it's basically teaching young kids how to tell stories, how to write and tell stories. It's a school-based program. They have teaching artists come into schools for 6 weeks and work with kids that tell stories, and it's fantastic. But they recently introduced a tool called the Whoopin' Bot, which is like a prompt engine for kids to ask them questions about their story development. And they'll say okay, here's my story. I got John Cena, and he's fighting a dinosaur over a volcano, like second grade boys, right? And then the Whoopin' Bot will say are they just fighting alone? Is there an audience? Is there somebody else? Did he fight somebody before? Where is this volcano? What happens next? What happened before this? And it'll give these sort of little prompt questions that you can imagine this if you're a teacher in that room. There's no way you can give individualized prompts to 27 rambunctious second graders. And so the tool just sort of just pokes a little bit as to help the kids like understand narrative sequence, understand character development, and let them, they do the story, it's their story, but just like prompts on the side. And the way they did this is they took we were gonna show a tool today where schools can program their own AIs. They're fully available in the Google suite that you all use, Notebook LM and Gemini Gems. Anyway, you can tone down the amount of help that the AI system gives. So the AI system naturally just gives you an answer, which is not what's required here. You just need like slight prompt to move ahead. And the more educators get a sense of like, how do you use these tools that adapt to the kind of learning we want to produce, rather than the kind of learning that the kids are designing themselves, just tremendous amounts of control and scope open up for educators.
I want to thank Rich. I mean, it's been a great day. He's been here with different groups, and it is one of those things where we don't want to be the group of people that in 1997 said, don't bring the internet into schools. And so it is finding a balance, how we don't want our kids lost in the technology, but we also have to figure out how to embrace it. And where this really struck a chord with me about a year and a half ago when I first heard Rich speak was worrying about that gap. Because we know, he used an analogy today, I think with teachers, the teacher group today is, think about ACT prep. So our most affluent kids have ACT prep access, or always did have ACT prep access, right? Because their parents could afford. They could afford the tutor. They could afford all these things. And as you continue to have more access to AI and different things like that, how does it start to level that playing field? And now it's not just the most affluent people have access to these things. It's everybody has access to these things. But it is a matter of trying to make sure, how do we embrace and put those guardrails in place? But it would be like saying we're not gonna do anything with AI, it'd be like saying we're never gonna cook with a microwave. It's coming. It's going to be here. It's already on your phones. It's already on your computers. It's everywhere. It was like in its infant state when you used to text and it had predictive text. You're like, oh, did you mean this? And you'd be like, darn it, autocorrect. No, that's not what I meant, right? But now it's even more. It's even more. It's even more. And so I think, it was an exciting day. It is kind of scary as we go through this, but having kids at all different ages, I can tell you right now, if you think kids aren't using this stuff, you're not with the current reality. I mean, they are using it, especially if they have a device. I mean, if they have any type of device, and I say device because I know sometimes people say, I'm gonna wait to give my kid a phone until they're in 7th or 8th grade, but I'll give them a tablet when they're 4. And the only difference between that tablet and their phone is they can make phone calls. And they don't even make phone calls when they do get the phone. They do all the same stuff, just on a smaller screen. And so the kids are using this stuff. And so we're trying to figure out how can we embrace it and how can we, with our staff, get on the front end of it. And we don't want it to supplant teaching, but, I think the ability to have that personalized tutor, and it is that good on most things. You can, if you haven't used it, ask it questions. I was kidding around. I didn't understand how Bitcoin mining works, so I went into ChatGPT and said, explain to me how Bitcoin mining works like I'm 8 years old. And then it breaks it down as if they're explaining to an 8-year-old. And I said, well, now talk to me like I'm a senior in high school. And it gets a little bit more complex. And then I say, talk to me like I'm a grad student at MIT. And yeah, I couldn't really even follow it, but it will do these things. And we have to figure out a way to live with this stuff and to embrace it, because I really do worry. The districts that don't embrace it will be left behind. And as Rich said, the families that can will, because they'll do it on their own, because we've already seen that. That's how history has played out. People that have means and have resources will. So, go ahead.
Mr. President, are we going to be talking about this more just as a board before we start implementing anything like this, so we can have more conversation? Is this something that the board is going to be asked to vote on to implement in the first place? Just, I feel like there's a lot of information being thrown in based off of the way the conversation is kind of I don't mean this offensively, but feels like it's really being thrown at us, at least by me. It feels like it's really being pushed. And I just would like to have more board conversation about this before we talk about how we would implement this. And, I mean, is that where this was going
Yeah,
tonight?
I mean, yeah, so this is kind of like a thought provoker. That's the whole reason that we're talking about tonight, because the board is gonna have to set some guardrails on things, and that's over the course of the next, 4 to 6 months and things like that as we kind of work through it. And we're gonna have to, with our staff, they're gonna try new things out. We need them to try things out, because we have to also get a handle on where they need help. Where do they need guardrails? Where do they need some of these things? And so, yeah, I mean, so with our AI task force this morning with educators, part of it is how could you utilize some of this in your classroom? How could you use an AI tool to help with X, Y, or Z? What does that look like? And we want them to try it out to see what it looks like, so we can start to say to the board, this is kind of what we're seeing, this is what we're getting, so that you guys can get real feedback, real things, not just, studies that may or may not apply. And so we can say, this is how it's helped. And we would expect that moving forward, you're gonna start to see people from the AI task force coming up and talking to the board about, this is how it helps me within my work, and this is, how we'd like to see things
And
progress.
Nick, what grades are we working on that in?
K-12.
Is it all the way K through 12?
Yep.
And I'm assuming that the curriculum providing companies,
There's a lot of AI built in. It's built, a lot of it's built in to the curriculum and what we do. I mean, it's prompting, it's a variety of things. It's built into just about everything, and it's just becoming more and more prevalent, so.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Real quick, I just wanted to again say thank you. You presented a lot of, I wish we would have gotten through every slide, some pretty cool studies that would be great, and would love to be able to come and take one of your classes and just learn a little bit. I think it's good that we're having this conversation and setting what the framework could be and how we can do it. We can't wish it away. We can't close our eyes. We have to understand what the realities are, and in service of helping our kids, be prepared, and parents as well. And Amanda, I know you have a little event tomorrow night on technology, and I'm looking forward to it. So.
Yeah, so tomorrow night, in cooperation with the mental health team, we're doing a how to keep your child safe online. And so there's 2 different levels for children under 13, and then there's dinner and a resource fair, and then children over 13. And the reason that 13 demarcation line is there is because the federal privacy laws are very clear about what companies can and cannot collect, what information parents should and shouldn't know when their child is under age 13. And so that's why we separated it, but I'm assuming they can still sign up, Tara? Maybe?
We will take any and all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next up on the agenda is Bonnie with the health insurance presentation.
They're right out there.
Oh, I guess I was wrong. I don't know. Right, yeah. No, no, we're good.
We get used to sitting on Mondays,
So, we have Brandon and Alicia from Malaria Group. They met with you, I believe, January? Is that when you were here last? October, just seems, yeah. So over the last probably 4 months, we have spent a lot of time with them. We did receive our initial renewal with Health Partners, which they're gonna talk about, which was pretty high for us. So we started looking at alternatives, and our number 1 priority was to maintain the quality of our health insurance plan. So I think over the last few months, we've really drilled down to coming up with a nice proposal that gets us from a renewal that was in excess of 25% down to about 9%. It also provides really good coverage for our employee benefits. It will look different because we were trying to think outside of the box. But some really exciting news. So they're going to present that, and then we'll answer questions.
green is on.
Green, okay. There we go. I'm live now. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. So again, Brandon and Alicia with the Alera Group. So today, like Bonnie said, we will go talk through kind of what we're seeing for renewal projections, but just kind of as a refresher of where we were last time, as you can see on the screen here. So we do have a 3-year strategic roadmap. We've kind of been through the 2025 initiative so far. Today, we really wanted to focus on really 3 different areas. The first being partnership review in 2026, cost-saving strategies that we've been evaluating, and then lastly, the retirement, or I should say, the retiree plan eligibility. So before we move on to those, we're going to look at some plan performance and kind of where we're at year to date. So as you'll see from your screen here, this is the financial reporting for February of 2026. Couple things I want to note here is we like to break out the retirees versus the active employees. We're also looking at a PEPM, or a per employee per month claims analysis that we're doing here. We look at any rebates that the district might be getting back from your pharmacy. And we're also looking at stop loss reimbursements that would be back to the district as well. One thing to note on the stop loss reimbursements from this last month, we did have, unfortunately, a pretty high month of claims, so there was a rather large stop loss reimbursement. That's why you have that there. But the stop loss reimbursements from January went from about 800,000 to about 1.6 million in February, so it almost doubled within that 1 month. But that's why you have stop loss, to help for those very high cost claims that come through. One other thing to note here is the loss ratio. So you will see you're running at 103.7%. So you are a bit over where you were projected for your claims for the 2025-2026 plan year, and we'll talk through that today as well. So talking through the loss ratio, the green line is going to indicate where your budget rates were for the 2025-2026 plan year. As you can see, every month besides January, you were running a bit over those budgeted rates, with the highest month being this last month, again, due to specifically a couple large claimants that came onto the plan. So you're not running horribly. The year prior, I think we were at about 125 to 130% loss ratio, so you are running better than the year prior. But we still, like Bonnie said, looking at some additional options to make sure that you're in the best place possible as a district. So looking at the retiree analysis, we were tasked with looking at, current employees versus the retirees and how that kind of stacked up. So since 2022, what we found by doing this analysis is that the per member per month costs for retirees have been much higher. We actually, in our analysis, it was calling for a 40% increase to retiree rates, which we feel was a bit too drastic. So our recommendation is going to be 10% over the current employee rates for 2026. But again, really just wanted to evaluate, okay, does it make sense with some of these retirees based on their claims and potential claims into the future to make maybe a bit of an adjustment on their premium rates compared to the active staff.
And just one question.
Yes.
So those retirees would still have the same healthcare options as the current employees? They would just, the premium would go up by 10% for them?
It would, the recommendation is to separate the rates from active employees. So now you have 2 classes of premiums, and the recommendation is to differentiate those base premium, total premium, by 40%, because the equivalent of the claims performance is they're costing about 40% more than your regular active employees. So their premiums and their portion will be 10% higher than what active employees pay, whatever you land on for that, right? So if employees get a 10% increase, retirees would get 20, because they need to have a 10% difference between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the plan design, all the access and everything would be the exact same. Deductibles, all that. Yep, you're welcome.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Just a quick question, and this is my own, just for my own knowledge, maybe others. Could you, so the retiree group, it's those those employees are insured by the district in the gap between retirement and Medicare, so 66?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, 65?
Yep.
In general, about what age, or how long is that time period?
It's 8 year, at the most, it can be 8 years, 57 to 65. And so, but some of our retirees don't start taking it until, they don't retire till 58, 59, 60.
So we did other analysis on top of just this, right, is to even evaluate, is it beneficial or is it harming the district's overall budget to have retirees on the plan at all? And what we've found is that the amount of premium that they're paying into the plan still allows the plan to not, it's not killing the plan to have them on there. So instead of, there are other public sector groups that are offering retiree plans that are sunsetting that program entirely because it's hitting their plan so drastically. And that's not quite the case here at this point with what we've found. So we think just differentiating that premium just a little bit to kind of get that, the budget in a better spot when you look at just this class by itself.
Yep, and total members on that retiree are probably, or I should say, former employees, roughly 45. So it's not a huge population, that are on the plan for those retirees.
And at Alara Group, we have a program called the Transitions Program that is very specifically intended to give retirees an opportunity to meet with an insurance agent to look at this plan and compare it to what's available in the marketplace. There is a lot of plans, programs, and subsidies that are available in the healthcare market that people can take advantage of. And there's a lot of times there's a perception that the district plan is the only option or the best option. That's not always the case. It just depends on how you use care and things like that. So that will be also available to them to just get counseling and things like that.
Yeah, and
Mr.
one,
President?
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Bonnie. I was just curious, and my question is actually for you, potentially. Of our retirees, what percentage actually come and take this? I understand the number is 43 right now, but of all of our retirees, do we have a sense, is that a quarter, is that 50%?
So in 2000, I believe it was 2016, you restructured your retirement benefit. So there was 5 groups and there's only 2 groups that were eligible for the benefit continuation.
Okay.
So one group, we've exhausted, those people have all retired, and then group 2 still allows people to stay on our benefit. Groups 3, 4, and 5 get money, but they don't stay on they have the option to stay on our plan, but they get money into an HSA.
Okay.
So those people typically don't stay on our plan because it is so expensive. But of that group 2, that would be that 43. So typically, those people are rolling off our plan because they're not eligible anymore for that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I'm tracking how you're dividing them.
So they kind of sunsetted the nicer benefit
Sure.
based on higher date, and then the newer date, they just get money into an HSA, and then they can use it to use any benefit they want.
Okay, so that group 2 is gradually becoming smaller.
Correct.
Great, thank
Correct.
you.
Oh, I was gonna ask that, Claire. So the 5 groups, it's based on higher date?
Correct.
Okay, so eventually, these groups will completely phase out?
Well, that's not totally accurate. So
okay.
what happens is the first 2 groups get a contribution to an HSA, health savings account, health retirement account, actually an HRA, health retirement account, at an equivalent amount to our premium. Okay, and there was group 1 and group 2, and it was tied to the premium. Then groups 3 through 5, it's a flat dollar amount. Okay, it goes into an HRA. Same way, they can choose whether you're in group 1, group 2, or group 3 if they want to use it to stay on their health insurance, or they can go buy other health insurance with it. And even groups 3, 4, and 5 could continue to be on our health insurance the way it's currently set up. It's just at whatever rate. And because they're getting a lesser amount, it's just not going to go as far. But so all of them are set up the same way. The step down has to do with the amount of money they get in retirement related to the benefit. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if all of a sudden, even somebody in group 1, they retire and they say, I'm not staying on the district's health insurance, we still put the same equivalent amount of money into an HRA form. And if, let's say, their spouse has a job, somewhere else has health insurance, that money stays in their HRA and they can use it for, let's say, Medicare Part B when they're 65 to age 90. It stays with them. It's just money given to them. So like what the Alert Group does is they will meet with our retirees and say, hey, you know, your money that goes in this HRA might last a little longer if instead of staying on the district's plan, which is a very nice plan, but it's expensive, you could go into the marketplace, find a plan that meets your needs, and the premium's less. They still get, you know, they still get there. We've never told them they can't stay on our plan yet. Some districts have. So some districts will say, if you take the early retirement benefit, which is the dollars towards the HRA, you can get it, but you can't stay on, you know, you can't stay on the plan. You have to go find your own insurance. So we could have people, the way it's structured right now, we get retirees on our plan indefinitely. We don't have anything that kicks them off. It's just they're getting less. Every group gets less towards retirement as we phased out. And that was done in 2013 or 14, right post Act 10, I believe. Scott probably remembers the date when they did it. But it was before I got here. And that's, you know, and they phased it out, basically started with people that were, you know, 50 and older, and then it was 45, and then they worked their way down with hiring. So.
Any other questions so far? One of the other, you know, tasks that Brandon had mentioned is specific to cost-saving solutions. That where are the areas of impact that we can really influence to reduce the cost? Because at the end of the day, as a self-funded plan sponsor, the largest amount of out-the-door expense is in claims. And so one of the things in the market that we found to be very successful is specifically around direct primary care. So just as a definition, direct primary care is typically seen as an employer fixed cost that's based on a per member per month fee in exchange for free access or very low cost access to care for employees, for members. And what that does overall is when you can get people the care that they need at the right time, you eliminate emergency visits, you lower inpatient stays. We're seeing an increase in preventive compliance and improved chronic condition management. And all of those things combined result in lower claim costs for the employer. So there's some statistics here that talk a little bit about like 40% fewer ER visits, which results in almost 50% reduction in ER claim costs. And again, lower just hospital admissions, whether that's inpatient, outpatient, or specialty care. And so our book of business is seeing, generally speaking, about 20% lower claims when we can find a direct primary care partner that is focusing on these areas in balancing out that fixed cost to get access to care. So because direct primary care kind of removes that friction at the front door of care, when employees access primary care quickly, you know, they stop defaulting to things like ER for primary care. They're creating a very strong or stronger relationship with a provider, which then lends to all of those things like better chronic condition management, better adherence to medications and treatment therapies and those types of things.
So, I mean, just reading lower ER visits, hospital admissions, that also makes me think it's not just saving costs, but it's also improving health outcomes for employees at the same time, you know, it's.
Yeah, 100%.
Because folks aren't ending up in the hospital as much and.
Getting their preventive care more frequently, they're getting early diagnosis or diabetes is a great example. If you're adhering to the medications, taking them on time, getting your A1Cs checked regularly and under the care of a physician, you're avoiding complications down the road that are very, very costly. So we did an evaluation of several direct primary care members, and Brandon's going to kind of run through those results.
Yeah, so we really looked at 4 different options, narrowed down to 3 as you'll see on your screen here. So we met with all these primary care providers, Reform Medicine, Inovia, and Hudson Physicians. The first 2, Reform Medicine and Inovia, are kind of like what Alicia said, a very common direct primary care model. You're paying a PM cost per member per month fee. You're getting access to pretty much direct primary care you know, labs, vaccines, imaging, all those different things are pass-through services. Hudson Physicians, a little bit different, kind of more of a hybrid model because they already have the facility set up down the road, as you know. They also include urgent care and some different pieces, direct contracting that are not necessarily there for Reform Medicine and Innovia. So we really liked what they had to offer with Hudson Physicians. Just the fact that they are so close to the district, they're right down the road, the access. We have several people who use their services right now who've talked about how quickly they can get in, whether that's same day, next day appointments. Again, the direct contracting, which we'll talk about in our next slides here, could create some significant savings to the district over time.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
quickly, Reform Medicine and Innovia, I haven't heard of them. Are they, their actual clinics in this area?
Yeah, so Reform Medicine has a pretty decent presence here in Hudson. The county across the street uses them as their clinic. They have a space at their building. There's also a building in Baldwin. They just opened a clinic, Menominee, some other places. So they've been in the business, I think 15 years or so. Novia has a stronger presence on the east side of the state and are trying to really develop some more market presence over here on this side. Also been around for a long time.
Yep. And they have a location, Menominee would be their closest.
Yep.
But yeah, we have, sorry, I was just gonna say, we have partnerships with different school districts or businesses with both of these, Innovia and Reform, so they do a great job. It's just, you're in a unique situation with Hudson Physicians being so close and all the different providers that they already have established. They just, it's a really unique opportunity. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what does DME mean under pass-through services for Hudson Physicians?
Yeah, durable medical equipment.
It's like crutches or,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
that type of stuff. Yeah. I think one of the things to really also consider when you're evaluating direct primary care is the way to get the most out of the dollars, the deepest cost savings, is very critically dependent on utilization, right? So if you're paying a fixed cost that's per member per month, and you only have about 20% of your population going, the ROI is just not gonna be there. So utilization is really, really critical. And when you think about these three options, you have utilization built into the Hudson Physician model already because people are already going to Hudson. Whereas in Reform and Innovia, you're starting at zero and asking people to change and adjust their care habits, right, where they're going. And that was a huge part of the consideration.
So just looking at the services included with Hudson Physicians, and this is not a full list, but some important pieces on here. So from your per member per month access fee that the district would be paying, that's including preventive wellness, acute care, urgent care, injury care. So all those would be included for free to employees and their family members for seeking care. They also have the pass-through costs, which would include the lab services, vaccines, that durable medical equipment like we talked about. There's also a pharmacy discount program that they would offer, and then also occupational health services. Beyond that, they would also have this is kind of the direct contracting that we talked about. They'd have a discount